Here we go. Okay, hi everyone. We are back. It is Tankie Therapy. There has been a regime change. We are here. Justin is not. He is at IKEA. We have photographic evidence of his crimes, and we are going to make fun of him mercilessly. No, I'm just kidding. Well, we might. But we're here with the team. We are waiting for a few more people who could be rolling on in. This is I've been playing with this new software that I downloaded that I still don't know how to use. But so there will probably be many mistakes, but it's okay. We're here to learn. Every day is learning experience. We're all students of life. But let's go around the horn and see who's here. Let's start with you, Nora.
Hi, I'm Nora. What do you want me to say?
Just say hi. How's it
Hi.
going?
Hi.
Okay,
Hi. How's everybody doing?
we're
Terribly,
good.
terribly.
Uh,
Every day is a new fresh nightmare. Um, but somehow we persevere. What are you doing, Sina?
I'm taking
What is
everyone off the
happening?
screen because you had to say something important. Now I'm going to put everybody
Okay.
back. Look, here we go.
I'm sure there's a way to do that.
Okay, okay, I
Not
won't
Such a
do
easy
train
though.
wreck.
I won't do that. I won't do that. I promise. Okay, Rob, your turn. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing okay. Thanks. Glad to be here with everybody. Obviously we're exposed to nonstop pain and horrors beyond our comprehension every single day, which isn't great. Obviously, I mean, I must say, there's certain things happening right now that are filling me with a little bit of optimism, a little bit of hope. That's kind of nice. You kind of forget what that's like after a little while, so you got to celebrate that and latch onto it when it starts to happen.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Alex?
Hey everyone. Uh, same situation. Although, as Rob just mentioned, I think what we've witnessed the last week at college campuses has given me a lot of hope. And having attended the short-lived encampment at my university, it was really cool to be there with my students and even fellow faculty members who really surprised me by just being there. So yeah, it's just that combination of horrific things that we're witnessing, and also a little bit of hope as well, and the possibility that things may change for the better.
Yeah. And last but not least, Joe. Joe, you haven't been on as much, so you might introduce yourself again. Oh,
Yeah, I guess
whoa. Whoa, how did that happen? What did I do?
just
Oh, I
heard
think I know
everything.
what's happening.
Off
Okay,
to a
Joe.
great start, Sina.
Yeah, this is great. This is great. I have an idea. Joe, turn your phone around now. Try that. See what happens
Try that,
now.
Donald. Okay, here we go.
Okay, that's better. Okay, now
There
Hey.
raise
we
it.
go.
Now raise the roof. Actually, it's fine. It's fine. Just leave it there. It's okay.
I'm
It's
okay.
not the end of
I'm
the
okay.
world.
All right.
Okay, okay, okay. Hi, Joe.
Yeah, it's great to see all the protests. But it's, of course, one sign that they're effective is that when you have the progressive Democrats trying to co-opt them, and they're, uh, AOC just got a lot of flack for snuggling up to Biden, and
Like literally
Ro Khanna
snuggling up to
is
him.
literally, yeah, literally, not, yeah. And Ro Khanna was on Twitter spreading the thoroughly debunked atrocity, mass rapes, hoax, the stuff. And so these guys will try to co-opt you and kind of sheepdog people into the Democratic Party and make sure that basically everything goes nowhere, just like Obama did. What I mean, somebody was so that's a fear. But I guess one thing that keeps I guess I hate to say the word morale, but when you see the actual the military analysis that John Elmer and Justin provide all the time, showing what Palestinians are doing in Gaza, continuing to fight, continuing to inflict damage on the Israeli military. I mean, that's I mean, how can anybody complain? How can how can anybody complain about anything when we see how much courage they're showing?
Yeah. And last but not least, although we maybe we got more stragglers, Mikey is here. Here, let's make everyone come on the screen miraculously. Watch. Here comes Alex. Here comes
There
Rob.
we go.
Here comes Joe, Nora, and me. Look,
Oh,
we're all
we're
here.
true Hollywood squares today.
Yeah, that's true.
You'll
How's it
notice,
going,
Nora, from the look
everyone?
of disgust that she's displaying right now with this production style that we're seeing.
She's like, this is Bush League. I'm out of
Some
here.
of this avant-garde production that we're seeing from
Listen,
Sina.
this software is very good. I stand by it. Mikey, tell us how you're doing.
No, it's actually fantastic software. I'm doing great because we're on Ecamm now. My friend actually works for this company. I don't know why I didn't think of this before when you're looking for alternatives. It's a great platform. I think things are great. We're witnessing the auto intifada. Two ministers apparently at this point have
Yeah.
been in major traffic accidents. And that kind of just made me think of something that Elon
The
Pape
roads are
said
Hamas now.
when yeah, roads are
Traffic
Hamas, cribs
lights.
are
Yeah.
Hamas, cars are Hamas, Karmas. And so like just what Elon Pape said about like why Israel is kind of destined to collapse, because what limited kind of degree of social fabric and an illusion of a social contract existed is kind of falling apart. And I feel like the basic inability to follow, fundamental traffic laws, I think, is one of those main things. Like, well, one of the people who quote tweeted my tweet about Ben Gavir's kind of like history of flagrant traffic crimes said that when she was on Birthright, that there was someone who like screamed at her because she was on the curb that they were just basically trying to park on, like parking on the sidewalk. And I think when you have a society built that way, it can't really last very long, especially when there's kind of like a collective insanity that the entire fake state has fallen into. And I think the encampments are kind of a great contrast to that, even though they are depicted in a kind of like funhouse mirror kind of way. I've actually recently and this is the Tankie Therapy part of my week, is that I've spoken to some people who are, generally on the right side of these things, but their only understanding of what's going on in the encampments is mainstream news media, and they think that everything's just kind of like completely going out of hand. It's just kind of like, a new modern day Gomorrah, and despite the fact that we're seeing that some of the most peaceful and kind of like liberal, uh ideologically aligned campuses like UT Austin are experiencing some of the most brutal police violence, which really goes to show that like it doesn't really matter like how you act. If you're standing for a certain thing, there will be a commensurate crackdown based on how committed empire is to that, the opposing political project. And yeah, I mean, it's just been amazing to see how resilient and how, across the board fairly disciplined the encampment organizers have been on all of these college campuses, not letting the narrative be taken away from them where they are able to control it. and and I think, I don't know if anyone's mentioned this before, just to the degree to which many of these kids, and these young adults have an incredibly advanced analysis of the genocide and where the battle lines are set, and how I haven't seen a single instance, for example, of anyone on campus in any encampment condemn Hamas, right? Or
Yeah.
do anything but kind of like openly celebrate the revolutionary struggle that's going on in Palestine right now. And I think that's something that's quite remarkable and very therapeutic to see, and
Yeah.
inspiring to see.
And last but not least, to say that yet again, Arama, nice to see you. You want to introduce yourself again? Because it's been a few weeks since you've been on.
Yeah, hi everyone. Arama from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I hope you can hear me all right. I wasn't here for the mic check.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, just picking up on the amazing encampments that we're seeing, and even the use of the term encampment, like often when we have like tent cities here in Aotearoa, we call them occupations, and now it's just so clear that that's the incorrect way to describe what's happening. And yeah, one of the moments that stood out to me, I mean, we've just heard about how the clarity of the vision of the organizers and their communication has been so strong, and how it's really making everybody aware about the brutality of state violence, even in the imperial core, of course. And there was that moment where there was a professor from Emory getting arrested quite brutally by the police, and she's calling out, I'm a professor," but
Yeah.
she sees that that position holds no weight with this violence that she's facing, and then she adds, "of economics," you know. And it's usually the most conservative, the most pro capital parts of universities are obviously economics departments. So I found that that this is such an awakening for those organizers, for everybody involved with those types of actions. Um, and just the types of solidarity that we're seeing is giving me hope. I've struggled for the past few weeks with a bit of long COVID, and having to, this is the Tankie Therapy part, where I'm talking about my own problems. But yeah, it became really difficult um, to function, and kind of the thing that had been holding me together were when I wasn't able to keep up with things, I could still watch Electronic Intifada. I could still watch Justin's sit reps and Tankie Therapy sessions to kind of keep me engaged. But even then, I started to feel nauseated, even like watching those. So I don't know if that's a terrible promotional thing to say, that your shows make me physically nauseated, but 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 yeah, that didn't last too long. Thank goodness. So I had to kind of almost treat myself as though I'd had like a head injury or something. But yeah, despite kind of the because everybody's at their limit here, everybody's kind of struggling in a way that doesn't obviously compare to what people are facing in Palestine, but just in terms of our own organizing and our longevity for the battle that we have over the next 3 years with a very out the gate government that we have. And yeah, the encampments that we're seeing are hugely inspiring, and the types of solidarity that we're seeing there and also here in Aotearoa have been really amazing, because it's like these people who, a lot of them have never been organizers before, um, and now they're getting visited by the police and it's not stopping them. People who have been like diehard single issue organizers are realizing that they can't hold any type of action without acknowledging and showing solidarity with Palestinians in the face of this act of genocide. And so people are dropping all of these identity politics that have held us apart, and realizing that your allies are those who show up with you and struggle. And also, a lot of the Palestine organizing here over the last decades has been led by older white settlers. And recently, we had in New Zealand and Australia, one of the biggest days on the colonial calendar is Anzac Day, where we uh, remember those who have fallen in battle. And there's a particular focus on World Wars One and Two. And we had some people trying to use that day to try to claim that New Zealand went over there to try and liberate Palestinians, and nobody was kind of having a bar of that. And it brought to the fore again the massacre at Surafend, where our soldiers, we didn't go there to liberate Palestinians, we actually massacred Palestinians as a state over there. And so all of that is kind of falling away. And we've heard over the course of this genocide many times people talking about the experience of Palestinians and their struggle being the tip of the spear, that is the most extreme form of settler violence that we see around the world, in terms of like industrialized, like fully automated genocide that's happening there. And what people are realizing now is that that may be true, but we can't let Palestinians stand in for our struggle. And that the best thing, in my view, we can do as Indigenous people here in Aotearoa, as other organisers, is to open up a front in our own countries to fight the empire. And I think these encampments are really showing that.
That that was really good. That opens up something that I was hoping to sort of talk to you guys about today. Maybe I was thinking maybe starting with you, Nora, can because I feel like there's an important. We should draw a timeline of events because not everybody who watches this or listens to this is as online as we are. So maybe we can kind of draw a little bit of a history of this, which is to say, the chain of events around these encampments is interesting because really, I mean, it kicks off in Columbia, right? Columbia University really kicks
Well,
off, and
there were
yeah,
other
Nora, you
encampments,
tell
but
us,
yeah.
yeah, you can so maybe draw it
So
out a little bit.
so Columbia was the one that got a lot of attention because it I mean, obviously the the president, Baroness Minouche Shafik, the Gusano of Egypt, went before Congress and and basically like placated these like right wing Congress members, saying that they call it like an infitata, and cursed by God, all these like crazy, and instead of protecting her students' right to organize against a genocide that Columbia University is invested in and has relationships to. She threw her students and faculty under the bus, including Joseph Massad and Hamid Abdu. And anyway, but before that, there were encampments at Vanderbilt University, sorry, in Tennessee, which is a smaller university that I had actually never heard of before. And I've been doing university campus organizing stuff for 15 years now, reporting on it. Um, and also Pitzer College in Southern California also had an encampment for a while. But yeah, but this wave of national encampments, and now international. I mean, they're now students in Paris, in Sydney, in Canada, in I think Turkey and Jordan are now reported to have some encampments on their college campuses. This wave, like Columbia was the kind of kerosene on the fire, if you want to use that analogy, and it just spread across the country in the last week and a half. And it's been absolutely phenomenal to see the, like you were saying, Mikey, like really incredible principled politics and like very serious organizing structures at these encampments, and that doesn't come out of a vacuum. It's not like these 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds just kind of thought of it on their own and they're doing it really well. This came out of a lot of foundational organizing by Students for Justice in Palestine chapters who've been around for nearly 20 years now. Other student coalitions who have had experience fighting cops and fighting repression on their campuses, and really like this very organized, politicized, principled, the culture that I think a lot of the Gen Z kids are immersed in. And we see a lot of schools, for working class kids, especially, of course, here in California, we have Cal Poly Humboldt up in Northern California. And they not only like formed this incredible barricade against the riot cops who were trying to storm one of their campus buildings. And there's that kind of infamous, image of one of the students holding an empty water canister and like, bopping the cop on the head. But they
The correct term is boink.
also have boink, right? Boink, yes, boink. Exactly. but like they've been able to successfully maintain a presence in one of the campus buildings. They're calling it the Cal Poly Intifada. I can't, there's some, like it's incredible to see these, working class kids at these state schools, at CUNY, at SUNY schools, at these smaller universities that don't get much attention, working in in very principled action, and learning from coordinating with students all over the country at all of these different universities. It's incredible. I mean, all the skills that they've learned. For someone was pointing out that Gen Z grew up in the last 10 years doing active shooter drills in their schools, because this country has different priorities than educating kids. They, or taking taking any steps to protect children from lunatics with machine guns. They've been using these skills of protecting themselves, forming barricades, and they're using them against the cops that are trying to come in and sweep everybody, to beat everybody. I mean, it's kind of incredible to see how these students are using all the skills, and they're doing it magnificently and with such principled politics. I mean, just looking, I was at the UC Berkeley encampment a couple days ago, and it was great. They had these like loudspeakers, and they were blasting Ghassan Kanafani being interviewed, and people were walking around with incredible signs and slogans, and yeah, it's not, like these students are they're not placating to liberal Zionist pressure. They're not giving any sort of credence to administrative pressure of like just dial the slogans down a little bit. Don't say anything about the Palestinian resistance. I mean, these students really know what they're talking about, and they're principled. There was this one sign, I think it was at NYU, it says, "Whoever is in solidarity with our corpses but not our rockets is a hypocrite and not of us." And I think that was a quote from
Wow.
a Palestinian fighter. I can't remember who, but it really like speaks to this level of this movement can't be co-opted by the liberals. It can't be co-opted by the Democrats, even though AOC is on Columbia campus, for the cameras. And I think this is a very interesting turning point for the ruling class, where we saw during the Black Lives Matter movement, Nancy Pelosi, kneeling in a kente cloth, basically marking the full co-optation of the Democrats to water down that militant movement. They can't do the same to this movement. And it's going to be really interesting to see how students at the vanguard of this, of these encampments across the U.S. are going to keep their militancy high.
Because what's interesting here is that this is a story of irony, right? Like there is an irony of these elite neoliberal admin who run the schools that we all know, in terms of like we know these kind of characters. They're on every campus, and their reaction to this to like immediately crush these student projects, student encampments, these like actual like initiatives on the part of students, things that they supposedly value, right? Like this is like neoliberalism says, yes, express yourself, yes, use nonviolence, yes, make a community, do it horizontally, like blah blah blah, and then they do it. And what did they do? They sent jackbooted riot police.
No, not that way.
To stomp. Yeah, like no, that's too much democracy. That's too much democracy. So like, I mean, we can open this up, but I'm curious to think like, because here in Toronto there was a student occupation. Okay, and the administrators immediately like saw them, and they went home soon after. Okay, now can I extrapolate that? No, obviously not. Like that's not something that you can just extrapolate. Like these things are kind of rhizomatic or whatever, if you want to use that kind of language, or if these things are kind of like what's the word? They're like part of nodes, right? Like so they don't necessarily connect. So like there's no necessarily like every response is the same, but I can't help but feel, and I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Is what did the response help inspire more of these? That if they had just said, okay, we'll listen to you, if they had just kind of said and kind of worked around them, I mean, they would have had to figure out they were they were forced to a confrontation in a sense, because that's where they hold their graduation, their do they call it convocation? That's a Canadian, that's a British Canadian thing. But whatever they call it, like it was obviously
That's
in the way of
graduation
that.
here. Yeah.
And and
Commencement.
the students did plan it that way. So they
Mhm.
were sort of doing what they were doing it to confront the, but I wonder, could the NIN have reacted differently, and would it have been the same results? Who wants to step in? I don't know.
It's been amazing seeing some of the statements that have come out of like sort of the administration there at Columbia, where they simultaneously uh, uphold and promote Columbia students' history of protest in Vietnam, and they talk about how those protesters were on the right side of history, and Columbia was actually in the wrong for responding the way they did. They promote and talk about the history of radical students at Columbia in the anti-apartheid movement, and they simultaneously try and kind of like take credit for like being this place where they can have this sort of free expression and promote these kinds of protests and this kind of dissent simultaneously while bringing in jackbooted thugs to bust up these protests. Not only that, but like there's laws being debated and are trying to be passed in the U.S. government right now to target these like nonprofit student groups like Jewish Voice for Peace. They're banning TikTok. And it's like there can be all kinds of stuff about TikTok, and I go, why is that getting banned? Is it just this business thing? Is it about user privacy? You have like congressmen going on TV and being like, there's so much pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas content. There's not enough pro-Israel content on there, and they're explicitly saying that that's the reason that they're doing that, and that's the reason that it's happening. So it's just amazing that they're doing everything. You see this palpable sense of panic, I think, among the sort of ruling class in the media, in academia, in politics. And that's something that's like, I don't feel like I've not seen like in my lifetime, as long as I've been paying attention to this stuff. You see this palpable sense of panic now. And every single thing that they're doing to respond to this growing movement is just ensuring that it's just going to grow increasingly radical, and that there's going to be more protests and encampments, and it's around the country and around the world. So it's been pretty amazing to watch them do this, but it's understandable in a way too, because I feel like there's a lot of parallels and analogies with the anti-apartheid movement as well. And of course, you got to a point with the apartheid movement where they treated Mandela and other people in the ANC as if they were terrorists. A lot of the same discourse, a lot of the same elites supporting the apartheid government in the exact same way that they support Israel today. Israel, of course, a big partner with the apartheid government as well. But eventually, it got to this tipping point where the U.S. government essentially had to sort of just cut them loose. They're too far gone. It had become the cause or like the issue on campuses and elsewhere. And eventually the West had to just say, okay, we're going to cut them loose. And then they used more nefarious means like the IMF to control the government that came after. But when it comes to Israel, I don't really feel like they have this option to the same extent. They can't really cut Israel loose. It's kind of this like sunk cost fallacy or like a mutual murder suicide pact. They can't really cut Israel loose in the same way that they once did with their partners in South Africa. So it's reaching this kind of breaking point. They're doing everything they can to try and hobble this movement and kind of snuff it out before it gets any further, but they're only ensuring that it is going to go much further. So there's kind of this inflection point coming up, it feels like.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I guess the short answer to the question, Sina, might just be that our oppressors always choose the tactics for us. So the more violence that they show, the more militant the resistance has to become. And yeah, I think that the more they send in helmeted, booted police officers into these encampments, the clearer it becomes to the young people who are participating, that their police forces are an extension of or that there is very little difference between the IDF and their own militant forces in the US, and also the more they send these these violent forces in to attack children, kids on campuses, the weaker that they look. And the more and more ridiculous their arguments that these are anti-Semitic protests become. Like, I don't know who that's fooling anymore, but it just looks pathetic at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I think we've all gotten a good
absolutely. I mean, if
political education
colleges
over the course of a week.
Oh,
Go ahead, Alex.
yeah, go ahead, Alex. Sorry.
No, I think I was just gonna say no. I was just saying that we've gotten a good political education off campus and on campus over the past few weeks, right? It's been quite clarifying to see the two sides involved, despite media counterinsurgency to portray these student movements as something that they're not. Did you guys see the video that they did at Cal Poly Humboldt where they showed like 4 or 5 helmets lined up from the riot police, which was like so dope. It was like a scene from Star Wars, right? Where they have the stormtrooper helmets like lined up. I love it. It's like their trophies. But like, so I was at my university, there was this moment after the summer of 2020 when we got these panicked emails from university administrators like, we're finally going to have a racial reckoning at our university, and we need you faculty to advise us and tell us what we can do. And I participated, well, knowing well that this was just a bullshit effort. Especially when right at the beginning, when some of us started to say, well, we need to either get rid of campus police or defund campus police, and let's say switch these funds to like creating a rape crisis center that continues to be inexistent on my campus. University presidents from the university president on down said, no, we're not going to touch the police, even though that was quite literally the thing that sparked, right, the summer of 2020 rebellions throughout most of the United States. I was at my university's student encampment on Friday, and it was like all the other ones that we've watched online. It was the opposite of how they're being represented in the mainstream media. There was no pathways being blocked. No student was prevented from going to class. Everyone was peaceful. Everyone was chanting. And the ones, as always, the ones who are rioting, the ones who are exercising violence, because that's their reason of being, are the police. And not just a single body of police, but we have a heavily militarized campus police. We have a heavily militarized city police. We have drones flying overhead with dudes sticking their heads out on rooftop building. So the reaction is so disproportionate because fundamentally these university administrators have no argument left. They have nothing else to say to students who have witnessed a genocide for months on end, who were told, as you guys have mentioned already, right, who were told to think of how to make things better in our society and the world, and it's just we've witnessed the bankruptcy of those efforts from neoliberal universities, whether they're private or they're public. I mean, I also think it's really interesting to see the media reactions to like elite private universities like Columbia versus what's happening at a place like Cal Poly Humboldt, and reflecting just broader social and economic inequalities that exist in a place like the United States. And then our encampment lasted maybe 12 hours. And then in the cover of midnight on Friday, they sent in riot police. And not only riot police, but they also had apparently local neo-Nazi groups helping, and maybe even some frat boys helping to tear up the encampment. So something that is very Arizona, but I think it's also like very ingrained in U.S. political culture as well. But then we have, and the final thing I'll say is, but then we have people like Fareed Zakaria, who wrote an op-ed today.
Whoa!
where his argument is. But I have to say this because what he so all we've talked about right now about neoliberal universities, about what students are doing, these students who have been shit on by people who supported things like the war on terror in Iraq, which makes me so irate. Like people like Tom Nichols, Paul Berman of all people, talking shit to these students, these cruise missile leftists and neocons. Anyway, so Fareed Zakaria decides to write an op-ed this morning, and his question is, why has the Gaza war spun colleges into chaos? His short response: because campuses have weakened as actual communities where people mingle, interact, and get to know and trust each other. So the very things that actually created these encampments and have led to this militancy. No. That's actually the absence of that is what created this. I'm going to lose. This is my Joker moment. I'm sorry. Like I'm having a Joker moment just reading this bullshit description of this op-ed.
Imagine actually believing that. Like, what a twisted worldview you have, and so out of touch with actual people, let alone anyone like under the age
Actual
of 30.
students.
That's insane. Actual students. My God.
So Mikey is next, but and Joe, I'm still waiting for you. You've been conspicuously quiet, but I do want to say this. I'm going to use my hosting abilities to shout over all of you. But what's interesting is that like we have how many hours and how many years of our lives have we spent like consuming media that fetishizes nonviolent occupations and like protests that are the goal of which are to break the circulation of commodities, right? Which is like the basis of our society, right? Like how many Maidans, how many like did have we watched, right? And yet those like these kids could have been like these kids were doing the most Gene Sharp thing possible, and yet our media class has villainized them to such a degree that like this is that it's bonkers, right? And so I mean that I'll say that before, but just Mikey, it's you now. But I just wanted to add that in there, that this flies in the face of everything in terms of what our media class, like prefers to see in terms of its rebellion. Mikey, go ahead.
Because that sets up the police response, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, Sina, but that sets up the police response.
Yeah. I mean, this is something that I think the U.S. wanted to avoid for quite some time now. Yeah, if we go back to like the miniseries that got suppressed from AJ Plus, the Lobby, the USA 4-part miniseries, right? There was plenty of attempts to nip Palestine solidarity efforts in the bud with a bunch of AstroTurf campaigns, doxing, surveillance, character assassinations, particularly via Canary Mission, the Israel Project, and APAC. And it was interesting because there were kind of two factions that were displayed in the USA version of the Lobby. One was like, let's just go straight to Congress because we can get just so much money and a direct line to uh, our foreign policy concessions that we want, which is a convincing argument. But also there was this other faction that was like, no, we need to be on college campuses, molding the minds of this younger generation, because those are going to be future policymakers and determinants of future policy. And if we lose the younger generation, that is basically the entire game. And I think what's being borne out in these on this campus kind of uprisings is basically proving that to be true. And this I think we are seeing kind of like the fruits of all of those years of organizing on campus being kind of harvested right now, and the fruits of kind of like the revolutionary struggle and the incredible inspiring resilience and the awful genocide that's being beamed into the phones of these younger generations, right? this is all of that rage, all of that radicalization being synthesized into actual practice, and action, and and uh and the ensuing police response, right, that Alex was referring to, I think is a small example of the as Reverend Wright would say, the chickens coming home to roost, right? The violence of the colonies coming home to the metropole. And you know and I think it's another mask off moment for America, right? Showing just I think some people have pointed out kind of the incorrect framing of how the US will beat its own kids before in service to a foreign power, when really it's American imperialist interests and capitalist domestic capitalist interests being revealed, right, in its violent suppression of pro-Palestine solidarity
Yeah.
movement, and 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 the interests of the Israel lobbyists and Zionists and capitalists being revealed as well, when when you see them openly calling for multiple Kent State massacre reduxes, right? It's just it's just an incredibly revealing moment. I think in a lot of ways, and I think also on the other side too, like many people have already mentioned, like this is basically revealing that every argument that particularly liberals and liberal academics have used to try to undercut this movement by saying that the students are wiling out and doing a disservice to their own uh goals, right, and to the movement itself. Seeing people in Gaza like writing gratitude and expressions of support on their own refugee tents in Rafah, right? It's incredible to see that. And people who are like white boys taking arrests, being thrown onto banners in Yemen. It's an awesome thing to see.
Hi. Yeah, I just want to mention something that really moved me. Like, I don't tear up usually just reading something somebody wrote. It has to be really powerful for, I mean, I just don't. Maybe I read this statement by by the people at one of the universities. I think it was definitely in Georgia. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name. And it was addressing this thing about outside. The administrators were saying outside agitators are just stirring things up at the university, and it was just so beautifully written the way they said, please, we welcome outside agitators. We want all the people in our community who've been rejected from this school, who've been made homeless. Um, and just reaching out to the community in such a beautiful way.
Mm.
Because one of the ways they'll discredit campus protests is saying, well, these are just students, elites, who are disconnected from working people, from people who aren't at the university, right, or haven't had the chance to go to university or whatever. So it was just so moving. I mean, even just thinking about how beautifully it was written, it gets kind of emotional. So yeah, I think that's key. I mean, just reaching out and to make something sustainable requires that reaching out to the broader community. So it's not just on campus. It's reaching out everywhere to keep this going and to organize it. Hopefully it'll keep going. But yeah, I mean, I think Justin read it out in one of his recent SID reps. He read out the statement. It's really beautiful. I wish I remember the name of the university. Maybe you guys know. It made reference to Jimmy Carter because it was a university Jimmy Carter was involved.
Oh, it's probably Emory. Yeah, it's probably Emory University in Atlanta, which is like Georgia's most elite university. It's really hard to get into. Most of the students who go to Emory aren't from Emory or Georgia itself. So it's one of those like very elite institutions in that corner of the country. And the students are resoundingly rejecting the elitism and the liberalism that's inherent inside these institutions. And yeah, I think I remember reading that too. And it's like, yeah, making like these students are, God forbid, using what they're learning in these institutions of higher learning and applying it to the context that they are situated in. So, connecting the genocide in Gaza to neoliberal economic policies, to militarism, to homelessness in their city, to poverty, to the cutting of social services. I mean, isn't that isn't that what education is supposed to do? Is to open up young people's minds to a bigger world? Right, right. Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. And to see the way that these institutions are just like, yeah, cracking down on it. No, no, not that way. We don't want you to apply anything to anything else. Just, come here, get your MBA, become a donor to the university and help our endowment. And that's what they want.
Sorry guys, this is a little chaotic. I'm loading up the Emory statement. I wanted to post it for the thing, but we can read it. But it's um, as the Emory is everywhere. As the Palestine solidarity movement rips across college campuses, college administrators and government bureaucrats are rushing to denounce anyone taking action as part of a quote outside agitator. Those who grease the gears of the war machine think that this rhetoric will erode public support for bold actions at Emory. They are wrong. 45 years, and it's a great statement. I mean, I won't read the entire thing, but I'll post it. I'll post it in the video. But we can. But yeah, this is just a moment. Yeah, and I think Mikey, you really nailed it because this is a mask off moment, and it is a sort of like, yeah, like everything that you say is fake. You don't actually mean do nonviolent resistance. You don't actually mean that because you only mean it when it says do nonviolent resistance against the countries we hate. That's what they mean, right? Like do war crimes tribunals against the countries we hate. Do like investigative journalism of the lies of the military of the country we hate, right? But don't do it against our little racist ethno-state pet project. No, no, no. I mean, the characters in all of this, like, unfortunately, we've gotten to know a lot of like sniveling Zionist scumbags who like pepper various institutions, and of course, there's no bigger scumbag than Shy fucking Davidi, who finally after essentially threatening to bring a group of people to the thing and essentially threatened conversation, he was then blocked by the university administration, and he made this big stink about it because that's what he does. And yeah, like these are like the university is full of people like this, full of Shy Davidis.
He really had the audacity to spend the last 6 months threatening students at the school, calling them pro-terror,
Yes.
calling them violent,
Slander.
advocating to call in the National Guard and basically
Getting them
create another
doxxed,
Kent State
yeah.
situation. Yeah, and then this fucking guy has the audacity to put out this statement where he's like, I need to request a police escort to school simply for going to my place of work. And it's like, sir, that's not accurate. Like that's not what you've been doing. You've been literally being an absolute menace to people for the last 6 months. Like no one believes this shit.
But that's what Zionists
Come
do,
on.
right? Like they
Yeah,
I mean,
it's the
that's like
ultimate
their
encapsulation
whole
of the whole
shtick.
ideology, really.
Exactly.
Can I cite a version of that of someone who works on my campus? He's a Christian nationalist who uses classes to proselytize. He in response to our campus encampment,
Really?
he said that this is what happens when he says this is what happens when you force faculty to decolonize their classrooms and curriculum.
They don't even care anymore.
Yeah, but he says it like the university has mandated us to do this.
We have all of these
It's okay, it's
Zionists
Sina's
saying,
fault.
I don't feel safe on campus. And it's like, great. You shouldn't feel safe on campus. You shouldn't feel safe with your Zionist views. Let's make Zionists.
Yeah,
great
you're
again.
a racist who is
Exactly.
espousing genocidal rhetoric. You should never feel safe. And it's a choice. It's not married to your identity as a Jewish person. Like they're, they have this whole thing about, it's this like insane weaponization of like the already disgusting identity politics shtick, which is like, I'm a Zionist and I feel so unsafe on this campus. Like they are choosing to be a racist ideologue. You can choose at any time not to be a Zionist. But it's this is their whole persecution thing. They're so persecuted, they need to not only support the genocide and have others support the genocide, but also have security around them to make sure that if they're calling for the genocide, that they can easily do so. And then they cry that they're being persecuted if 18-year-old students are telling them that they're racist. It's ridiculous. Sorry.
Nora,
Yeah,
I
and I
think you're
guess this is
forgetting
something that
that
I've been interested
genocide
in.
supporters are a protected class.
Yes.
Exactly.
We need to
Why don't you
decenter
why don't you just let
ourselves
us
from
do
the
this?
marginalized position of the genocide supporting class.
Yeah, I guess. Well, I guess this is an important something that's been on my mind as well, paying attention to this, and it is Tankie Therapy. So I guess it's a good place to talk about it. But we've talked about the really inspiring militancy of this student movement and the kind of unwillingness to allow it to be co-opted cynically by whoever. And yeah, I think I try to be kind of generous about this, but I think it's completely irreconcilable and incoherent to say, oh yeah, I'm against the genocide in Gaza and I'm going to go visit these student encampments. And also, by the way, you got to go vote for the guy that's paying for the genocide in Gaza. I think this is two mutually exclusive beliefs that you cannot hold simultaneously at the same time. But I guess the thing that concerns me as well is that, again, we talk about how unified this movement is, and the way it's being tied into other class issues, other social issues, and anti-racist issues. And I guess the thing that I get concerned by is then when you have people that start to use this sort of revolutionary, anti-colonial, liberatory language about Palestine, and then saying, and that's why, and have you read my work at like the NED sponsored Tibetan Freedom Network as well? Because we need to decolonize Tibet and Hong Kong and Taiwan and Xinjiang and Ukraine as well. We not only should we be supporting Palestine, but we have to also, support NATO and in their funding of the noble Ukrainian struggle against Russian imperialism and this kind of stuff. Because I think that's an angle that a certain sort of very nefarious type of person can use to drive a wedge into this movement, which should have a really strict and principled kind of anti-imperialist characteristic, and try to steer it in the direction of attacking America's enemies rather than staying completely focused on Western imperialism, which should be the primary kind of contradiction, the primary driver of all this violence and all this war, whether it's in Gaza or whether it's in Ukraine or elsewhere. So that's something that I feel like, I'm interested to see whether the line can be held there, or whether these kinds of elements are going to be able to kind of infiltrate this movement and wedge themselves in and start to kind of like wreck it and dissipate this energy and direct it into really like non-useful directions.
It's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, I kind of think like I'm just thinking about like crazy like Lyndon LaRouche's and some of the like the weird like boomer organizations. They come to every protest and they have signs
Yeah.
that don't make sense and they're like yelling about something incoherent. I don't know. Like that's a really good point, that there might be, the Democrats can't co-opt this intifada. But there could be other elements that try. I think I don't know. Like I think that students are so much more awake and understanding of dialectical materialist analysis that has anti-colonialism at its core. Like real anti-colonialism, not like fake anti-colonialism that serves imperial interests.
Yeah.
And I hope I hope that I hope that they can make that distinction. And I think that there will be a lot of people in the movement, you know, professors, like those of us who are on this call right now, um, or journalists, or people who have been around the block and can see these kinds of waves coming. That that we can help guide that analysis in the right direction and expunge these like saboteurs in the movement. I don't know. Wow, that's me being like
I
very
think that
hopeful, which is mark that down because
that's good. That's good,
I
Nora.
swear.
That's good. I think
I don't know
I
what
think the
came
bigger
over me.
threat at this point, I think the bigger threat is the wave of repression that's going to continue. So not just more cops and the breakup and the attacks on these students, but also longer repercussions on their activism, whether it's students or faculty or staff that have collaborated and supported these movements on campus. So I think we need to. That's going to be, I think, the one of the lasting consequences, right? That I think we need to watch out for, because as I think Rob's exactly right. Like this is not a co-optable movement from the Democratic Party, no matter how much they try. And I wonder historically, like we can always learn from past social movements and think about pitfalls to avoid. And I'm thinking about the 1980s Central American Solidarity movement that arose in the U.S. And I mean, you had like 150,000 Americans who traveled to Nicaragua to do literacy campaigns in Nicaragua and to just put their bodies on the line to prevent Contra attacks on like border communities between Honduras and Nicaragua. And they also created the Underground Railroad to sanctuary movement to bring in Central American refugees into the United States using this grassroots network of churches and just a bunch of different civil society type of institutions and organizations to help out. Like I wonder if what sort of lessons we can think about that. And I know once I get in the classroom, because I'm mandated by my university apparently to decolonize the curriculum and what I teach them, like I think and I'm teaching a revolutions class, Latin American revolutions class, like these are the kind of things that we're going to be thinking about, because that Central American Solidarity movement also generated all sorts of different repressive methods by the Reagan administration, and also co-opting efforts from the center left, to say it generously, from the Democratic Party at that moment as well. But I just, that is like the one thing I keep thinking about, is that solidarity movement and where it failed, where it achieved, lasting accomplishments, and potentially like what we can learn from that today.
I think if we're speaking about like what kind of potential vulnerabilities and what kind of risks of defeat could be presented, I think besides kind of just, I think it's actually less likely that violent suppression will result in the students being cowed, because I think we can clearly see how completely radicalized these students have been, and how pretty much nothing will stop most of them from continuing to try to make these demands. I think one potential risk besides co-optation would be stagnation. I'm kind of recalling, I can't remember which town and which kind of politician actually strategized this, but when folks in civil rights movement were trying to do sit-ins at like Woolworth's lunch counters, there was one pro-segregationist leader who studied MLK and their strategy, and basically made the whole town accommodate the sit-in demonstrators while they were in their town, so that the efficacy of that type of direct action uh, lost all of its weight, because they were allowed to eat at the lunch counters while they were there, and the moment that they left, it became segregated again, right? And I'm thinking that
Hmm.
I don't. I mean, the universities and the legislators in all of these cities have been dealing with things in such a heavy hand. But if they were smarter about their tactics, and we have seen, if nothing else, U.S. empire can be kind of pliant and flexible in response to these large movements. They can wear them out through attrition by conceding to demands that that don't present an actual obstacle to the everyday operation of the institution, right? So if, for example, people continue to stage an encampment on a quad that can be walked around, as opposed to taking the actual facilities that are required for a functioning in-person classroom experience, or even kind of the functioning of day-to-day faculty work, then I could see how, like, if colleges just allowed that that momentum would fizzle out, because the encampment is not interrupting business as usual. And I think that's and also I think also just one more thing is like a tyranny of structurelessness. If there's one thing that I think maybe the students should maybe be wary of generally, is not to take too much out of the Occupy playbook, because there wasn't really a playbook, and I think a certain lack of structure and a lack of clarity of purpose in Occupy is part of what destroyed it. Yeah.
It's a really good point. Yeah.
Look who's here, everyone. Justin.
Justin.
Justin's
Hey.
here. Hi, Justin.
Hi guys. Is it
It's
is
working.
my reception as bad as it feels, or is it okay?
Yeah, no, everyone
It's
has
okay.
the worst reception, and
sound good.
it's lagging like 5 seconds behind. And yeah,
Everyone's fine.
it's
In
been
fact,
great.
Okay.
in
all
fact, everyone is fine. Everyone's
is
happy.
Probably at the end it's
They're-
gonna make sense, but when you're talking, it's not gonna make sense.
No. These are all slanderous
Okay.
lies. Everyone is fine. Everyone is fine. Justin, continue. And then we miss Joe Emmersberger.
Joe's here too?
Joe's here too. Look, he's right
Oh,
there.
yeah.
Look, let's
Hi,
say
Joe.
hi, Joe.
I can't see
It's okay. You don't have
everybody.
to show me. All right.
Justin, how are you doing? What are your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, this is all, I'm really stressed out. I guess as a faculty member, like I just see these students and I feel so worried for them. That's always my first inclination. And when I think about them like getting kicked out of school and stuff, it really stresses me out. I mean, not as much as it stressed me out that when Israel systematically destroyed every university in Gaza and murdered a whole bunch of students and faculty, but like, you know, this is it stresses me out, the thought that these students aren't going to be able to finish their work, and like they're being beaten up and police are on their campuses and stuff. And I don't know, there was like I'm an associate dean, eh? So there was an associate dean who gave a speech, and she was like, I'm in all likelihood I'm gonna be fired today.
Sad. I am so sad. I am grieving, and you should be grieving too, because what we've done as a community is to break the fundamental link between us and our students. I would imagine there's a fairly high likelihood I will be fired today. But I can't sit here and watch this anymore.
And I just thought, wow, yeah, that's I can imagine this type of speech in my future. And so it was just I don't know, that I like it's something else to watch. But like for me, it's also like there's something when you think about like how much suppression of the Palestine movement on campuses has taken place. Like every campus in North America, every campus in probably the Europe and the West and North America has like basically like 3 mandates. The first mandate is like invest in Israeli weapons manufacturing. The second mandate is real estate. I think there's 4 mandates: real estate and gentrification of the city. The third mandate is suppression of Palestine activism, and then the fourth mandate maybe somewhere is like teaching some classes. So like when you think of how much effort and energy has gone into suppressing this movement, and the fact that it's like just like burst out of on all of these elite campuses, it's just like you get the feeling like everything that they've done as elites is for nothing. Like what that it was all for nothing. They've managed to achieve, like it's just like the pro-Israel campus uh war campaign has managed to achieve as little as the on the ground military campaign. And it's amazing how fragile these systems of control seem to be. That, you know, that's what's striking. Like for those are the two things that for me I'm like wow, like after all of this work that they've done to try to make sure you can't say apartheid, you can't say genocide, you can't say this, and student organizations are getting out, they've been outlawing all of them. There's you know, just look at the work of the legal group, what are they called, Palestine Legal, and like how much of
Palestine Legal.
their
Yep.
work is just like suing ordinary campuses. Yeah, like how much of their work is like suing campuses for suppressing student Palestine organizing, and yet, uh, you know, here it is. Like it's all happening, like in massive numbers across all the universities where they've encamped, and like their best ideas on Twitter are so bad. They're just like, why don't we commit to never hiring anyone from all the elite universities in the country? And why don't we appoint commissars to make sure, government appointed commissars to make sure that there's no anti-Israel sentiment on these campuses? Like these things are they're such bad ideas.
Zionism enforcers.
And
like for the professors on this call, and I'm like an ex-academic. I was just like a grad student, lowly worker. I guess I am an academic in the sense that I have a PhD. I occupy myself with the same kinds of things that academics do, at least to a point. But like ultimately, we're talking about institutions, and these institutions have a limited number of people in them. And the more people, and also a relatively limited number of people who can access them. Like, sure, tons of people apply, and people who are like offended by what any of these schools are doing, like the administrators are probably telling themselves, like, oh, it'll be fine. We have 50,000 applicants. We'll have 49,000 next year. Who cares? Like, what did this really cost us? And we kept our donors happy, and we're still a neoliberal hellhole. But I think there's something deeper happening, which is like literally like this ruling class of the US sees like their own power, their own influence, their own relevance over the world like just circling the drain, and they've just said fuck it, we're going to punish everyone that who's involved with any of this drain circling. We're going to attack any group. I mean, these Columbia people artificially like like through kerosene, as you put it, I think it was you, Rob, like they really threw this whole thing just to show their Zionist donors that they are like good little lackeys for them. I mean, really, like just who cares? Just tell the Zionist donors, all right, it'll be over later. Just stick with it. It's okay. But no, they couldn't allow it. They had to stamp it out as violently as possible, causing a bigger problem. I mean, yeah, like this is, I don't know. I wonder if this is like is it an inflection point? Maybe not. Maybe we're overblowing it. But like there is something profoundly wrong with the West right now, and it is manifesting in all different kinds of ways. And the fact that these neoliberal administrators are like losing their minds and doing things that are illogical and damaging to their own institutions and their own jobs, like this is a sign of something bigger, I would say. Like, you know, it's decline is slow. Yeah, they are panicking. It's true. Decline is a slow thing. Like historical declines are not fast. I mean, there's the old Orientalist thing of, oh, the Ottoman Empire declined for 200 years, right? But like the US empire is rapidly declining, and it's manifesting in its institutions, and its little racist pet project in the so-called Middle East, West Asia, is making it go faster. Okay, it's bleeding it faster, and they're responding by encouraging their racist little ethno state to do things that make the bleeding increase. Okay, so like this is one of those things that I always wonder about. Like when we talk about like, oh, is it in the U.S. interest to support Israel? It's not. It is. It's against it. Whatever. It's like no, you're ascribing rational powers to an irrational entity, to like a kind of like beast that only can circulate in like a tornado. So like this is something that I feel we are going to remember. This, I feel we're going to remember these scenes. I mean, there's so many horrible violent scenes that we all know, that we've watched over these, like, 6.5 months almost. Joe, why don't you go? You haven't said anything in a while.
Sina, we need it. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Okay. Well, talking about past movements that kind of didn't achieve as much as they should, in some cases maybe fizzled. I think one thing that's striking is just the lack of an anti-imperialist party to emerge from all that energy. Political party, a real alternative, like to the Democrats or to the establishment parties. And if you look at Latin America, somehow in Bolivia and in Venezuela and Ecuador and for under Korea and stuff, and Nicaragua, obviously those resistance movements coalesced into a political party that could take power, and that doesn't never seem to emerge, no matter how wonderful and inspiring movements can be in the West for a period of time. It never seems to coalesce into that. So I don't know if it's a reflective anti-electoral mentality among the Western left, or an aversion or a structurelessness problem that Mikey pointed to, but that's something. I mean, Justin and I have talked about. Justin even wrote an essay kind of outlining some ideas about it, about a political party, what it could look like, because what exists is just not adequate. Like it's just not up to the task at hand.
I do think the Democratic Party is a bigger problem than like the structurelessness, right? Because it's like, I actually, I don't know. I feel like Americans are pretty good at organizing, and I feel like there could be a party in a pretty short amount of time. It's just that there's no way to, like, the Democratic Party will suck all of that energy, and they're already there, right? Like AOC already visited,
It's like what they
Ilhan Omar
exist
already
for.
visited.
Well, that's kind of like the Democratic Party's whole existence is so it can absorb the energy of those social movements and dissipate it into nothingness.
Yeah, absolutely, and we have that in Canada too, and so it's I feel like that is the barrier. That's the first line of defense, is and the first line of co-optation, right? I mean, what's interesting and dynamic about this situation is that it's the Democrats that are doing the repression right now, and it's usually like the hard line is the conservatives and the soft glove is the liberals, but now you have the hard genocidal mailed fist is the conservatives, which is that's also what's, I think, to use a Nora Barrows Friedmanism, like breaking people's brains right now, especially pro-Israel people.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the amazing thing about like making this case, like, now you got to vote for the Democrats or else some really bad stuff's going to happen. And it's like, you mean the stuff that's happening right now, currently? Yeah, okay. I feel like that stuff's already happening. One thing I wanted to mention too, I think we talked about this a little up front before we got started, but was this whole meme of like, what are we, a bunch of Asians? When people are like, they're seeing these scenes of violent, jackbooted, testosterone-fueled thugs beating the shit out of student protesters
Americans.
and carting them away, and having this immediate instinct to compare it to some other country that they've decided is like authoritarian or whatever, because of whatever narrative or history that's been promoted. And so there's a couple things that are interesting about that, though, because it's like you're seeing right now like really incredible snapshots of like Chinese social media, like sharing political cartoons and images of like these American protesters. There's a really cool cartoon. I shared it with Sina earlier. I don't know if you can actually open it, but it's this cartoon of this young woman being taken away by the cops. You see like snipers on the building behind them. So you see this kind of like burgeoning sense of solidarity there, which is kind of exciting. And I think one of the most actually amazing things about this is that, like, almost person for person, the powerful people in politics and the media or academia or whatever who were the first person to say, we got to call the cops, get the cops in here, bust up these encampments, call in the National Guard, beat the shit out of these students. These are the same people that talk about Tiananmen every single year. And it's 40 years ago. They are holding up this incident from 40 fucking
Yes.
years ago every single year, talking about it and using it as some kind of like image or evidence that we live in this profoundly free, safe, democratic society, not like those other places around the world like China where they don't have any of these freedoms. The same people, they talk about Tiananmen, they obsess over and fetishize Tiananmen and the imagery of it and the story of it every single year. And they're all, every time you mention anything about China, that's the first thing that comes up. Also as evidence that Chinese people have, like, don't have access to this kind of history or don't know it happened or something, which is just a completely fraudulent lie that has just been basically made up. But I think that's just an incredible, it really sums up this kind of like total disconnect that these people have, that they'll focus on incidents like Tiananmen for decades and decades and decades. And they're the very first people to, when these encampments come up, of radicalized students saying we're against genocide, we're against this US sponsored client state mass murdering little kids. And these exact same people that talk about Tiananmen every single year, call the National Guard, get the cops, where are our jackbooted thugs, where are our tanks? It's truly just amazing. I don't know if it's useful to point out this kind of like hypocrisy, but it is truly incredible to me that you can be someone that could simultaneously hold these two thoughts in your mind.
Yeah, I think one thing that has also been a really big mask off moment in these encampments is just kind of the role of the university in the United States Imperial Corps, the way that it hasn't devolved so much as morphed into this kind of structure for capital accumulation, where particularly the closer the Ivy League and high tuition, high prestige universities that are kind of like basically avenues through which to gentrify an entire community. They're basically operating essentially as hedge funds wearing a school trench coat, right? And it's not really an institute for learning anymore. It's and I think the obvious thing is that we all know by now is that the Democratic Party is this kind of its sole function is to absorb all of the radical energy coming from the left, and to serve as a bulwark against kind of the fascist encroachment from the right. But I think what this is also revealing is just the tremendous degree to which academia in the US serves as a kind of sponge to co-opt and diminish the impact of any type of revolutionary activity, particularly within younger generations, to serve as both kind of like that gated community under which knowledge is kind of imprisoned, uh but also a way to enclose any type of revolutionary potential within the Imperial Core. And I think we're seeing a lot of the kids in the ivory tower basically trying to break out and hopefully deliver on a promise of if if the demands aren't met, then the ivory towers will fall. And I think one more thing that I want to address is a possible um vulnerability is we're seeing despite all the refusals during the peak of COVID transmission, to go to remote options, or hybrid classes, right? This move to make all classes now on all of the campuses that have encampments, giving them a virtual attendance option or closing off the campus entirely, to students, to basically fulfill the neoliberal fever dream of a campus without students, and just universities being entirely comprised of just admin. I think that is another vulnerability that I think
Yeah.
I don't know what the solution to that is. It's like, how can you stage an encampment at a place that is no longer a campus, right? Just an administrative building for capital.
Yeah, no, I think this is good. This is like we're in a moment. I think I want to say something, and then Justin's going to wrap us up. Um, but like this is in one of these moments you have to sort of like remind yourself as if it's some kind of mantra. Like we the denizens of the settler colonial countries that were birthed by European like empires, right? Like we're part of this kind of far-flung network. Sometimes it's called the West, sometimes whatever it's called, like, the global North. But ultimately it's like this complicated historical relationship that at the base of it requires you to make that, like, the foreign policies discussion and like this sort of outward discussion of how society should function, or political discussion in general, is always based on this strange kind of like absurdity, which is, on the one hand, here we are like in the US, right? This is speaking as like, someone supposedly living in the US. I don't live in the US, but whatever. I live in the satellite of the US. But like, we live, this is like the world's most advanced prison state, right? The most advanced carceral society that has ever existed, right? Where they have this army of slave labor, right? That's like enslaved people, essentially, who get paid pennies per hour to work across different fields like manufacturing, firefighting, phone call, like whatever, service sector, right? Like this vast carceral, like archipelago. Talk about gulag archipelago. This moment on campuses is a reminder, is that this is the most police authoritarian state, whatever liberal term you want to apply to it. That's what the US is. Like, are we the baddies? Yes, you are the baddies. Like, look at you as you send in jackbooted thugs to thump the skulls of some teenagers, right? Who are like sitting there camping, okay? And like playing guitars, right? Like, literally, you are the enactment of everything you project onto the, like, your enemy states. And so this, yeah, it's not just like a masked off moment, but it's like the absurdity of our so-called sort of political imagination exposes itself in times like this. And we have to remember that. Like, I lost a ton of friends during Women Life Freedom because I said, look, like, 20,000 people at most have been on the roads of Iran, of a country of 88 million. Like, whatever you want to say about the Iranian government, whatever you want to say about whatever happened to Mahsa Amini, whatever happened to like other people, whatever happens in in the jails, like, the fact is that 20,000 people took to the streets, no more. That was the biggest number. And yet our media class spoke about it as a revolution, right? Like, the biggest thing you can do in a country, the biggest thing was that somehow that this was like a revolution. There is something deep in our beings, in our Orientalist brains, that like 1,000 years of history has primed you for, that makes you think that like all the bad things that happen in other countries, bad countries, that they don't exist here, right? And so, like, that's the operation of this moment. I feel if there's any fundamental lesson, is that like you're the baddies, like we live among the baddies, and like it's not Nazis, it's not like people dressed up with like skulls on their shirts, it's normal business. It's like those people who were walking to the White House press correspondence dinner,
it's Nazis.
right? Like,
It's
yeah.
Nazis. It's Nazis too. It's Nazis too, though. Like,
Well, it is
did
Nazis
you see
too, that's
that?
true.
It's
Did
the
you see
Fourth
that?
Reich, baby.
Yeah, they're
Did you see the cop?
literally also
Did you see
there.
the two
Yeah.
cops like dragging that girl away and going, "You were saying something about the Nazis? You were saying something about Nazis?" Did you guys see that
Yeah.
video? That totally insane video?
Yes.
There's these two German cops and they're dragging someone away and they're speaking to her in English and they're like, "You were saying about Nazis?" And they're gonna go like kick her head in and show her not to call somebody a Nazi. Like, so yeah. Sorry, Sina.
And
That was
just
one of the
here
most
today, as I was driving, there was like over one of the main highways here in the Bay Area, there are like these like little like pedestrian walkways, and people like they like hang all sorts of weird signs. Today there was an advertisement for the Patriot Front going through Berkeley
Jesus.
on the freeway. Like what? That's a first. I haven't seen that in Berkeley yet.
And people are like,
literal
"Where are the
Nazis
cops?"
are
And it's like, well,
also
they're there at the rally.
right. That's right. Yeah, they're busting people's heads just 2 miles away at campus. Yeah, it's insane. Or they're there. They're there. The cops are the ones stringing up that sign over the
Yeah.
freeway overpass. Yes.
Justin, you want closing thoughts? You get to close us out.
Can I say 3 things? Yeah, I have 3 things. So the whole like lack of demands thing that we used to hear, I actually think it's pretty good in this case. They're just following the Houthis, right? I mean, the Houthis were like, we don't have any demands besides ending the aggression on Gaza. We'll stop what we're doing when you end the aggression on Gaza. Otherwise, there's nothing to talk about. There's absolutely nothing to talk about. So that's like, that's a sensible position. This is a genocide after all, right? This is not like a give and take. We're not in the phase where we're talking about who gets what parcel of land or which benefits we're picking and which benefits we're not picking in the collective agreement. Like, this is a genocide. The demand is to stop it. After that, there's no other really details to negotiate here until that happens. The other thing, there's 2 other points. One is like, Mikey, you were saying like there's a vulnerability with the fact that the campus becomes just an administrative apparatus. But I actually think this is a test. We're gonna be facing a test, and I think it's a good test, which is like, what do you need to have a university? I think all you need is students and teachers. And if that's true, then all the people that are going to get purged in this gigantic purge that's going to happen, we'll be able to actually build something. We'll be able to actually build an actual university without all of the hedge fund and all of the gentrification. And then we'll go back to what universities are supposed to be, which is like teaching students things. And students can learn and teachers can teach. And we can even give, credentials for that. We can say you've gone through this course, and people can take their little digital tickets around, and there will be people who accept those credentials. So I actually think this is a chance to start the whole university, to reboot the university. And if they are inclined to fire a whole bunch of faculty for being pro-Palestine and expel a whole bunch of students, then they've just created the university of the future. So that's my personal kind of business plan moving forward. And then the other thing is just to explain to people who have that view that like vote blue or something bad is going to happen. Like, I was thinking about that when you said that, Rob, which is like, genocide is the floor. That's as low as we go. Like, there's nothing lower than genocide. There's nothing worse you can threaten people with. So the only way out is up. Like, there's no, or you can say the Republicans will be as bad. That's an acceptable argument, but you can't say they'll be worse, because genocide is the worst. So if they're genocidal too, then they're as bad. But like, people who are anti-genocide don't really see a lot of ability to nuance this kind of situation and talk about how, okay, they're both genocidal, but this group has this or that better policy or not. So
Can you come talk to my dad, Justin?
Yeah, I'm available to consult with any parents and any dinner table.
Great.
Book me. Pre-recorded messages, WhatsApp messages, however you prefer to do it.
He can use Ecamm. We could use the Ecamm software to connect you to.
Never again.
No.
It's like a whole real-time
Okay, we'll
conversation. Easy.
Thank you, everyone. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, take care. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Later.
I'm gonna press finish.
Bye.